Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, and welcome back. In this session, we're going to be talking about part 2 of activity diagrams and requirements development. In our last session, we built out 5 activities based off of 2 scope items that were provided to us by the client stakeholders. In those activities, we decomposed them into composite diagrams, one for access, one for access failed, one for tailoring, ordering, and then the 5th one for order processing. Now I'm in the Sparx factory default layout with browser over on the left, properties in the upper right, and notes in the lower right. But I like to work in my custom workspace, and I'm going to go there now, which I call common, and it's going to load the workspace that I most productively work in. And that's Toolbox I have over on the left. I have Browser along with Pan and Zoom and Inspector in the upper right. I have Notes, Properties, Traceability, Features, Scripting, and System Output in the lower right. All right, so this is the layout where I'm going to start with through this demonstration. So why did I tell you that? Well, if you recall in the last session, I have a layout that I use for simulation. We're going to bring that up as we're working through this exercise to build an environment that's best for simulation. And I have a layout for collaboration and review. And collaboration and review, since I'm in a cloud SQL environment, allows myself and stakeholders, team modelers and members, other architects, to collaborate, push notes, and start conversations. So we have discussion and review history. I have in the bottom underneath the work area. I keep notes rather large in between Pan and Zoom and my work area, so I can move quickly between browser, Pan, and Zoom. And then I have properties, discussion when I want to start a discussion or a journal or a review. And then traceability, features, I have system output, and then I have scripting, which we're not going to get into in the session, but this is my workspace for collaboration with other stakeholders. Now back over in my simulation work area, what I typically do is close everything except my activity diagrams, because this is where I want to start focusing. And I'm going to go into the first activity. I'm going to go over to Pan and Zoom, make this fit a little bit better. I'm able to move around the activity if I need to. I'm able to zoom in by holding down the control and rolling my mouse button and move around this way as well. So now I'm set up to start the simulation and then start my review of the architecture, the project, the effort, if you will, going forward. All right, so let's go ahead and run our simulation all the way through. There's a couple of ways to do that. Number one, I could certainly start it over here in the simulation window. If I'm in the simulation tab or simulate tab in the run simulation panel or group, I can start it here. But I usually start it from inside the diagram that I'm focused on. So if I right click in here, I get a pop-up menu and I have 2 choices, manual or interpreted. We're going to go manual simulation. So I've started it. Simulation's running through. My call stack, I can watch that. I get to the first decision point here, and I can either access denied or I can pass through login validated. Let's run the simulation for access declined or failed. And so it's running through. I'm going to go ahead and run it through. It goes into access failed, runs through that flow, returns back to the access, and then stops, because there's no point of going forward if they fail. Now I can put a loop in here, a counter. We're going to allow 3 attempts to trigger that simulation. It would bring up the decision again, let me do it 3 times. But in this simple exercise, we're not going to do that. All right, that's all I'm going to explain from this point going forward on how we got there. I'm going to go ahead and run the simulation again. Right click in here, manual, and start it again. So it's starting the simulation, it's going through, hits the decision, and I want to validate the login. It's going to go down through to the next activity. And we're going to go ahead and say OK to that and launch that. So it's going into tailoring. It's going to get down into the ordering flow, and I want to go ahead and process that. But we're just going to go through the flow just to step through it before we start our review. So we're going to submit the cart. We could continue shopping to add items to the cart. We're going to submit. It's going to go through, and we're going to accept payment. It's going to go through. We're going to go to ship the order processing. So it's now in order processing. It's going to run through that, and then it is going to close. And then it's closing the other activities just like you would do in programming session management, and we are complete. Now, during your simulations and your review, you can come up here at any particular point and put stops, all right? So in this particular case, we're going to go to the breakpoints, and we're going to put a stop on login validated, and I'm just going to go ahead and add it. So it's already enabled when I add it. I can disable it or enable it, as I explained in previous videos. So now when we run this simulation manual and it's running through, we can have it stop, and then we can step through. So access validated, it gets here, and it's going to stop, all right? So at this particular point, there's lots of things I can do. I can look at my call stack. I can look at local variables. I can look at the simulation steps and so on. The other thing that I can do is I'm stopped here is that I can start taking notes. I can right click on this element, mouse over collaborate, and open a discussion. So at this particular point, I could ask a question, pose or make a statement. I just start a discussion with the team members that are working with us in this project. So you can put stops at a particular point, which is very useful. You can clear the stops. You can stop the simulation here or here. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. And you're able to put breakpoints at any point within your modeling that you just want to, maybe you want to stop here and you want to ask a question. As I explained in the video, you simply select the element that you want to put a breakpoint on. I have breakpoint window up in the lower right, down in the lower right. I just add breakpoint, and it will add a breakpoint to this particular item as we're going through and stop it there during processing. So when I right click on here and I go to run simulation manual, it will step through this activity diagram. It will hit this breakpoint and it will stop, and I'm able to ask questions, start doing conversations here, as well as journalize, do reviews, and those things. So I can stop at particular flows to be able to start a conversation, ask questions, and collaborate with stakeholders in this cloud SQL environment. All right, I'm going to go ahead and disable this breakpoint. I'm already stopped here. So we're ready to proceed anywhere we want within the conversation. All right, so let's go to our activity diagram. We're going to right click in here and close everything except for that. Start with a clean slate. We're going to stay in the simulation workspace, and we're going to start with the first activity. So if I hit Alt Enter, I can bring up the properties for this. I can go to requirements, and you can see here that the team has already started developing some requirements for this activity. So their convention, and you can use any convention that you want, starts with rec for requirement. This has a numeric reference to the activity that they're focused on or the subject. And then within the subject, they have a naming convention that steps through the requirements. So they can come in here and elaborate on this using story form, such as actor, action, and achievement. So they can write all of that out and then put in their acceptance criteria, bullet that out using ordered list or unordered list, and then go through here and elaborate on the requirements that are here. And then what they can do is they can move them external. So when you're building requirements in an element, and I explained this in the requirements video, you're able to externalize these requirements to wherever your requirements management repository namespace folder is. And in this particular case, I'm going to cancel out. We're going to go to browser. So browser, here we go. And then in the demonstration for this project, I have a requirements repository where we've externalized these requirements. Here are the 4 requirements that have been externalized for access. We have requirements that have been built out for access failed, for tailoring, and then that's where the team has stopped at this point. So we need requirements on ordering and order processing. And of course, we're going to work through iterations, ask questions, make assumptions, and continue to build requirements as we're going through our review at the activity level. Later, we'll dive down into the actual actions, if you will. And if I hit Alt-Enter and bring up properties, I can even start writing requirements at any one of the element levels. So you can imagine that the requirements can get rather large for this simple work effort, and we're certainly not going to get into all of that. But as we're doing testing and we're building out our requirements via the activity diagrams, it helps us proceed faster as we move into other methods of requirements engineering, requirements development. Right now, I'm going to go into my collaboration and review workspace layout. Makes it a lot easier, but I can dance back and forth between whatever workspaces are most productive for me. So in this particular case, let me go ahead and close this one. Let me go ahead and close this one. I didn't make any changes, so no, I don't need to save it. So as we're going through these activities, we're writing notes and we're explaining these activities. All the stakeholders can come in here and they can contribute to elaborate on what each one of these are. You're able to come up down here where I put discussion and review, and you can see discussions that have taken place today for each one of these, as you know, the date and time, who the collaborator was, and it was me, the author. As they're going through, you can double click, which will drive you to discussion and review. You can see here that a discussion, this was a journal entry by me. Here's a discussion that can start. Here's a review that can start. So as you're going through each one of these and we're in discussion, we're able to see what's taking place, if at all, for each one of these. So if we go into, drill down into access, and we go down here, you're able to look at, well, what discussions are taking place there? Here's a discussion here. Do we assume there are no changes to the current identity management supplier? So Arco, our fictitious company, is using an external identity provider where they allow the user to log in through those systems and then pass successful authentication, valid authentication, so that they can authorize them to go down and do other things within their e-commerce platform. So you're going through your simulations, you're elaborating, this is staying what the starting point is. They're elaborating on what this flow is, and put as much notes as you want in here for your documentation and explanation to the users. They're starting discussions on each one of these where they have questions or concerns on what's taking place, and discussions. They can do journal entries, and reviews can take place as each stakeholder is moving through the models. But more importantly, they can go through and continue to build out their requirements for these items as the project moves forward. And another very important point or process step that you should make, and I explain this in the versioning, is that you should baseline your packages. So I'm going to hit Control, Alt, and B. You can see that version 1, which was the initial baseline of this effort prior to this day's start, I can put in a baseline, any stakeholder can put in a baseline. I can see that the last version was 0.1. This is going to be 0.2. You can put in anything you want as far as a convention. So you can see here that UML operator did a baseline in this date and time. Always want to include sub packages, which are going to be all of these. Let's go ahead and start this and run it. And it's going through posting this baseline to the SQL database, and it is done. So now I'm able to do a compare show differences. Now, of course, there's not going to be any differences to the one that I just baselined. But when you're working with multiple stakeholders and team, you're able to do comparison to see, well, what are the other team members working on? What changes have been made? What kind of conversations are taking place? So, or you can hit Control-Alt-B, bring a baseline. I want to see the differences from this snapshot time to this one. I can hit Show Differences. It will go through and do a compare against what's taking place in the last baseline, whatever that is. And you can see a lot of changes have been made. All these packages are showing up. These are all changes. This was removal. That's what red means. So you're able to see things that have taken place within your project at any particular point. Highlight items are the changes. So you can see in the baseline, there wasn't a name for this element. Now it's called access declined. There weren't any notes. It was blank. Someone added some notes, very brief. They just put in name or something like that, and so on. So you're able to compare and do baselines as you're working through as a team at any particular point and take snapshots. Now, a lot of times I'll take a snapshot just to remind me, a conference call or it's the end of the day or what have you. I'll take a snapshot of where I left off. And this convention I like using because I put the username, whoever the modeler is, up front, saying, oh, UML operator made this one, client, John Doe made this one, or whatever, tester made a baseline. I can come through and I can remove my baseline. So I can come up here and I can hit delete selected. It'll ask me if I'm sure, and I've hit yes, that is gone, all right? So I'll do that, take snapshots, then start new snapshot from that point at particular times I'm doing work. It can get rather messy. I mean, you can imagine if you've got a dozen people that are working, this thing can fill up pretty quickly. Not all the baselines are necessary. The initial baseline most certainly is necessary. The model administrator or the project manager, whoever you've designated, they might take an end of day baseline. They might even say end of day baseline. They might come in here. This is going to be 02 because they're going to leave on whatever the last one was. They may even, you might have a convention where they put in, regardless of what's been removed or deleted, to go to increment to the next one. And in this particular case, they might put in UMO EOD. So UMO operator, end of day baseline, and then they'll do a baseline end of day. So you can keep and journalize your versioning, say, oh, here was an end of day, here was the initial, here's one that this particular tester made, a particular point. You can show comparison to see between what others have done, what you've done, and what they've done as you're going through in your collaboration. So someone might say, hey, do we need requirements for this? And then you'll come in and you'll do a comparison. You can go down and baseline any package. So I'm going to baseline requirements. It's the first one. So I'm going to hit new, 01. And I can come in here. I'm going to take a snapshot. And all it's doing is baselining this package and everything that's down within this package. So all the sub packages that are here. And then as requirements are being added to the requirements management point, target, folder, namespace, you're able to see the changes that are taking place in real time as you're moving through in your project. So very powerful, this exercise you're going through. Collaboration extremely important between your team members, and you can do that in Sparx in real time. There's so much you can do. I could spend hours on it, but I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up this session right now. Now we're going to close this session. We've covered a lot of material. We've shown how to go back through the simulations, how to stop. We've shown how to collaborate and discuss, have conversations. You can go to discussion and history. Again, that's, if you haven't seen my previous video, you go to start. Here you can launch discussions, discussion history, and then you can put the window anywhere that you want. Journal history, reviews, and I'll have a video on how to do reviews later on, but you're able to start that here and see what's taking place today and even going back in time. So you're able to monitor your conversations and your collaboration as you're going forward. I showed you how to launch various workspaces that are productive for you. And once you set yours up, you're able to move between them pretty quickly so that you have the most productive space for you to work in at any particular point. In our next session, we are going to get to use cases. We're going to build out use cases that match or fit. Let me just float it right here. That are activities. So we're going to build out a use case for all 5 of the activities, and we're going to use what I've shown you as far as effective use case development to help you with simulation. I showed you how to build auto-generate activity diagrams, test cases, and other types of diagrams. We'll be able to continue to build requirements inside these use cases and externalize those for requirements management. So in our next session, we're going to move to use cases as we're building out our requirements, continuing in this project. So I look forward to seeing you there. And until then, happy modeling.